Never asked how I was doing. They only ever asked when I was going to get my life together. It was the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and my father had that look on his face before he even put down his fork. The one that meant he'd been saving something up. My brother was already leaning back in his chair the way he does when he's about to enjoy watching someone else get lectured, arms crossed, that half smile I've hated since we were kids. My mother had made pot roast. The house smelled like rosemary and garlic, and the kind of warmth that makes you almost forget the people inside it. Almost. I ran into Rick Holloway at church, my father said, not looking up from his plate. His daughter just got her real estate license. Sold 4 houses in her first 3 months. He paused to let that land. She's 26. My brother chuckled. Stable income, good for her. I kept eating, you know what Rick said. My father set down his knife. He said a woman who can't own anything will never keep a man who can. That's just the truth of it. The table went quiet except for the sound of silverware. My brother nodded like our father had just quoted scripture. That's not even controversial. A man wants a partner, not a dependent. That's basic. I'm not a dependent, I said quietly. You're renting, my father said. At 31, same apartment you've been in since you left that firm? I left that firm 3 years ago. Exactly. He said it like it proved his point. My mother touched his arm lightly the way she always did, and he softened just enough to change the subject. My brother steered the conversation back to himself, a development deal he was working, a property in Phoenix, investors who were taking his calls. My father listened with a particular pride he reserved for my brother, the kind that involved sitting up straighter, the kind he never had for me. I finished my pot roast and thought about the alert I'd gotten that morning. 3 new lease agreements signed, 2 in Raleigh, 1 in Columbus. Gross rental income for the month sitting comfortably above $40,000. I poured myself more water and said nothing. The version of me who lost everything is the one nobody knows about. 3 years before that dinner, I was sitting in my car in a parking garage in downtown Charlotte, crying in a way I hadn't let myself cry since I was a teenager. I'd just been walked out of a commercial real estate firm where I'd spent 4 years doing everything right. The long hours, the weekend calls, the clients I'd charmed into deals that made other people's careers. I was the one who got let go. Budget cuts, they said. Restructuring. My manager didn't look me in the eye when he said it. I called my then-boyfriend from the parking garage. He answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear the TV in the background. They let me go, I said. A pause. How? You were good there. Restructuring. Another pause, longer. Okay, well, you'll find something. The way he said it, careful, measured, already protecting himself from something, told me everything before he even said the rest. I've been thinking, though, you know, with your lease up in April and everything, maybe this is a good time to reassess. What you actually want to do. What's realistic? Realistic? I just mean I can't be the one holding things together indefinitely, you know? He wasn't holding anything together. He was paying his half of restaurants we split down the middle. But I understood what he meant, and I think I'd known for months that he meant it. He wanted someone with a title, with a trajectory he could explain to his friends. I had just become something he couldn't explain. We broke up over text 4 days later. He didn't fight it. My father texted me that afternoon. I'd made the mistake of telling my mother, who told him. Told you corporate real estate was a ladder you weren't built for. Something steadier next time. My brother sent a voice memo, 8 seconds long. Rough break. Let me know if you need a reference or whatever. I didn't cry again after the parking garage. I decided I was done with crying for a while. I opened my laptop and started reading instead. Her name was Irene, and I found her through a forum for women in real estate investing at 2 in the morning when I should have been sleeping. She wrote the way people write when they've actually lived something. No polish, no brand, just the truth of how things went. She'd been a schoolteacher in her 40s, owned nothing, divorced and had used her settlement money to buy a duplex in Akron, then another one. Then she figured out how to use equity and move faster. By the time I found her thread, she managed 27 units and had walked away from teaching 4 years before. I sent her a message that said something like, "I have nothing but time and I'm willing to learn. Is there anything you'd want to teach?" She replied 6 hours later, "You won't like how boring it is at first, but boring is how you build something they can't take." She was right. It was boring. It was spreadsheets and market cap rates and learning to read a property inspection report and making embarrassing mistakes in my first 2 offers. It was working mornings at a title company just to be near the transactions, just to hear the language spoken out loud until it stopped sounding foreign. It was months of watching my small savings account and doing math. I redid 3 times before I trusted it. My first property was a single family in Greensboro. 2 bedrooms, dated kitchen, a foundation issue I'd had inspected 4 times before I was willing to believe the numbers worked. I bought it for $161,000 with an FHA loan, found a tenant in 11 days, and lay awake the first night of the lease listening to nothing and thinking, this is mine. Not glamorous, not a story anyone would want to hear at a dinner table, but Irene had told me something that stuck. The people who brag early never last. Build in silence. Let the portfolio speak eventually. So I built in silence. I didn't tell my father when I bought the second one. I didn't tell my brother when I formed the LLC, Halcyon Property Group, a name I chose carefully, something that sounded like it belonged to someone else. I didn't tell anyone when I hit 10 units, or 15, or when I refinanced and used the equity to move into a new market. At family dinners, when they asked how things were going, I said, "Fine, still doing property management consulting," which was technically true. I was consulting for my own portfolio. My brother would nod the way people nod when they're not listening. My father would say something like, "Well, as long as you're keeping busy." My mother would smile at me with that careful smile she had, the one that held both love and worry in equal measure. I kept pouring my own water. The first time I saw my brother in a professional context, it was an accident. I was in Nashville for a property walkthrough, a 12-unit apartment building in East Nashville that had come onto my radar through a wholesaler contact. My LLC manager, a woman named Sondra, who handled the public-facing side of Halcyon so I could stay invisible, had set up the meeting. I was there as a silent observer, the way I preferred. I was standing in the parking lot reviewing the inspection summary when a car pulled up and my brother got out. For a second, neither of us moved. He was there representing a buyers group out of Phoenix, the same deal he'd been talking about at every dinner for 6 months. His client wanted multifamily in Nashville. He'd been cold calling wholesalers for months trying to find inventory. He found the same one I used. He looked at me. I looked at him. Sondra was standing next to me with a clipboard. "What are you doing here?" he said. "Walk through," I said. He looked at Sondra, then back at me. Are you representing a buyer?" "I'm here with Halcyon," I said simply. He didn't know what Halcyon was. He'd never asked. "I didn't know you were. In what capacity?" "Investment review," I said. Sondra, bless her, handed him a business card and said, "We can't discuss deal terms directly, but feel free to reach out to the wholesaler if your client is still interested." Then she walked me inside. My brother didn't get the building. Halcyon did. We closed 6 weeks later. He never mentioned it at dinner. Neither did I. The call came on a Wednesday, early evening, when I was reviewing lease renewal terms at my kitchen table. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew the 704 area code, Charlotte. I answered. "Hi, are you affiliated with Halcyon Property Group?" A man's voice, careful, like he was reading from something. "I can answer general questions," I said. "Who's calling?" "My name is Warren Beld. I'm a commercial broker out of Charlotte. I've been working with a client, a small development company, who's looking for a joint venture partner on a mixed-use project. We've heard Halcyon has been active in secondary markets, and I wanted to reach out directly rather than through intermediaries." I asked him to send a summary to our business email. The summary came in 20 minutes. I opened the attachment, and the second paragraph stopped me cold. The sponsoring entity is Holbrook Development Group, a family-owned firm based in Charlotte, NC, founded in 2003. My father had founded Holbrook in 2003. I was 11 years old. I remembered because he'd taken my brother and me to the office the first day and let us sit in his chair and pretend to be in charge. And my brother had worn a tie and I had worn a blazer that was 3 sizes too big. And my father had laughed and taken a picture of us, and it was the last time I remembered feeling like we were all in it together, like I was part of what he was building. I read the summary twice. Then I forwarded it to Irene with one line. Something came up. Need to think out loud. She called me back in 4 minutes. Your dad's company? Yeah. And he doesn't know Halcyon is you? No. She was quiet for a moment. What does he need? I looked at the summary again. The project needed a capital partner, $2.1 million, equity stake, no bank financing available due to existing debt on Holbrook's books. The underlying land was solid. The projections were aggressive but not impossible. But the debt situation was worse than they were probably saying in a broker summary. More than he's asking for, I said. I requested a formal meeting. Sandra handled the introduction. I wore my hair differently that week. I'd recently cut it to my shoulders and was wearing it straight, where before I'd always worn it curly at family events. I wore reading glasses. I'd switched to after ditching contacts, and I went by my middle name, which I'd been using professionally for 2 years. My last name, my mother's maiden name, Calloway, was on all Halcyon documentation. I want to be clear about this because I know it sounds like a plot device. My father had not seen me in 7 months. The last time was a birthday dinner at a restaurant where I'd mostly sat at the end of the table and let my brother do the talking. We hadn't spoken on the phone in 3 months. He didn't know what my hair looked like now, or that I wore glasses, or that I went by a different name professionally. And I looked, in that conference room, the way I looked at work. Not the way I looked at work, not the way I looked when I was his daughter at Sunday dinners. More than any of that, he wasn't looking for me. He was looking for a capital partner. When you're desperate, you see what you're expecting to see. I walked into Holbrook's conference room on a Thursday morning and my father stood up to shake my hand and said, "Thank you for coming, Miss Calloway. We appreciate your firm's interest." And I said, "Thank you for having us." The presentation was 45 minutes. I sat across from him and watched him pitch, his voice steady, his posture straight. The same man who'd sat at the head of every dinner table and spoken like authority was just his natural frequency. But I could see the edges. The way he paused too long before the slide about existing liabilities. The way his project manager, a younger guy named Felix, kept looking at my father before answering questions instead of answering them himself. The project had problems beyond the debt. A permitting delay they buried in a footnote, a contractor relationship that had soured. The projected rents were benchmarked against a comparable building 2 miles away that had since been struggling to fill units. When the presentation ended, I asked my questions. Clinical questions. The kind that don't feel like attacks but leave no room to hide. When I pointed out the permitting footnote, my father said, "Temporary setback. We've dealt with city planning before." I said, "Your timeline assumes resolution by Q2. The city's current backlog suggests Q4 at earliest. That's a 9-month delta on your pro forma." His jaw tightened. "We'll manage it." "I believe you intend to," I said. "I want to understand how." Felix jumped in. My father let him. It was the first moment I saw something I hadn't seen from him before, a willingness to let someone else carry it. At the end of the meeting, he walked me to the elevator. He looked at me for a moment before the doors opened, just a beat longer than professional courtesy. "You remind me of someone," he said. "I get that sometimes," I said. The elevator came. I stepped in. The doors closed. I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and sat in my car for 20 minutes before I went inside. We structured a deal over the following month. Halcyon would come in as a preferred equity partner, $2.3 million, structured to protect our position if the project underperformed, with a clause that transferred operational control to Halcyon if Holbrook missed 2 consecutive distribution milestones. I signed it with my professional name. My father signed as founder of Holbrook. I watched the countersigned document come through on a Tuesday afternoon and thought, he doesn't know he just signed a contract with me. Irene texted me that night, "How do you feel?" I looked out my window at the courtyard below my building, the one I'd always liked because it had a fountain that ran year-round, and I thought about the parking garage in Charlotte and the text from my father the day I lost my job and my brother's 8-second voice memo. "Strange," I wrote back. "Like standing at the beginning of something I can't see the end of." She sent back, "That's how it always feels when it's real." The project hit trouble in the spring. The permitting delay stretched past Q3. The contractor dispute escalated into a partial work stoppage. Holbrook missed the first distribution milestone by 60%. My father called Warren Beld, who called Sondra, who told me. I didn't respond immediately. I pulled the latest bank reconciliations. Holbrook was required to send us under the partnership agreement, and I read them carefully. There was a pattern in the disbursements that shouldn't have been there. Money moving from the project account to a holding entity that wasn't in any of the disclosure documents. Not large amounts, but consistent. Monthly. I called Irene. "Is it fraud?" I asked. She was quiet. "It could be a bookkeeping mistake. It could be him trying to manage cash flow in a way he doesn't understand is a violation. It could be worse than that. He doesn't seem like someone who would." I stopped. "You're not asking me what he is," Irene said. "You're asking me what you do with what you found." I didn't answer. "Sleep on it," she said. "Don't make a decision about your father at 11 o'clock at night." I slept on it for 3 nights. On a Thursday, I drove to Charlotte. I didn't announce myself. I walked into the Holbrook offices and asked for my father as Ms. Calloway, the Halcyon representative. He came out of his office looking tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not the controlled exhaustion of a busy man, the kind that lives behind the eyes. We sat in his office. I put the reconciliations on the table. "We've identified some disbursements that weren't disclosed in the original documentation," I said. "I need you to walk me through them." He looked at the papers. He looked at me. It's not what it looks like," he said. "I've been moving cash to cover a shortfall on another project. A bridge. I was going to bring it current. That's not permitted under the partnership agreement." "I know." The room was quiet. Outside I could hear someone on a phone call down the hallway, and somewhere further away the sound of a drill. "I've been trying to keep this thing alive," he said. His voice was lower now. Not the dinner table voice. 20 years I've been building this company. 20 years of making payroll and managing jobs and keeping relationships. And the last 3 years it's been a hard run. The market shifted and some of our clients went elsewhere, and I made some choices I wouldn't make now." He paused. "I'm not making excuses. I needed you to know it wasn't nothing. It wasn't casual." "I know it wasn't casual," I said. He looked at me again. That look. Searching. Something in it I couldn't read. "You remind me a lot of my daughter," he said quietly. "The way you think, the way you don't let anything slide." My throat tightened. I kept my face still. "She's sharp," he said. I never told her that enough. She went into property, some kind of consulting thing. I was never quite sure what she was doing. I didn't ask the right questions. I thought I knew what success was supposed to look like for her, and I assumed she wasn't there yet. He looked at his hands. "I hope she's doing better than I've let on." I looked at the reconciliations on his desk. I looked at the window behind him, where the Charlotte skyline was grey and flat under October clouds. "What if she is?" I said. He looked up. "What if she's doing better than you ever imagined, and she's been waiting for you to ask?" He was still for a long moment. Then something moved across his face. Not recognition, not yet, but something close to it. The beginning of a question he wasn't ready to ask. "Mr. Holbrook," I said. I reached up and took off my glasses. I looked at him the way I used to look at him when I was 12, and trying to understand why I was never the right kind of answer to his question about what success looked like. He stared. I watched the moment arrive in his face, the way it moved from confusion to something that looked almost like vertigo. His mouth opened. He said nothing for a long moment. "It's you," he said. "Not a question. It's me." The silence was the loudest thing in the room. "All of it," he said. "Halcyon. All of it," he said. "Halcyon. All of it." He looked at the desk. He looked at the reconciliations. He looked at his hands. "You sat across from me," he said, "in the conference room. You asked me about my permitting timeline. You had the wrong timeline." He laughed. A short, broken sound. Not humor, something else. "God." He leaned back. "How long?" 3 years of building. I bought my first property the spring after the firm let me go. I didn't. When you said you were doing consulting, I thought. I know what you thought." He was quiet. "At dinner I said, last November, you said a woman who can't own anything will never keep a man who can." His face changed. "I own 43 properties," I said, "across 4 states. My gross rental income last year was over $900,000. I have 2 properties under contract right now and a LOI on a 16-unit in Chattanooga." I wasn't saying it to wound him. I was saying it because it was time for the truth to be in the room. "I've been sitting at your table for 3 years while you told me what I wasn't. I needed you to know what I am." My father didn't move for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quiet in a way that wasn't performance. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't. I should have asked." "Yes." He looked at me with something I had almost forgotten was possible from him. Not pride in the way he looked at my brother, the loud, claiming pride of someone who wants credit for proximity. Something quieter, more honest. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it, for what I said at dinner, for the years of not asking, for being so sure I knew the shape of what you were supposed to be that I never looked at what you actually were." I didn't say it's fine, because it wasn't entirely. I didn't say I forgive you, because forgiveness isn't a light switch. But I reached across the desk and put my hand over his for just a moment, and I said, "Let's figure out how to fix the project." We restructured the terms. Halcyon brought in a new contractor, negotiated a settlement with the city on the permitting, and I personally reviewed the cash flow with my father once a week for 3 months until it was clean. The disbursement issue was addressed in a formal amendment. No attorneys outside the deal were involved. It wasn't because I was protecting him. It was because the pattern didn't rise to what Irene had called the threshold, and because what I wanted was not to destroy what he'd built, but to make it honest. My brother found out in February, when my father finally told him. I wasn't there for that conversation. From what my mother said later, it did not go smoothly. My brother called me that night. "You've been holding this over him," he said. "That's what this is. You engineered this whole thing so you could—" "I invested in a deal," I said. "The deal had problems. I fixed them. You should have said who you were from the beginning." "When?" I said. "At what dinner table, with what announcement, would you have heard it? When I told you I was in property consulting and you laughed? When Dad told me a woman who can't own anything will never keep a man? When would you have listened?" He didn't answer. "I'm not interested in holding anything over anyone," I said. "I'm interested in building something that lasts. You can be part of that or you can keep score. But I'm done shrinking so that you can feel bigger." He hung up. We didn't speak for a while after that. That part was hard. I won't pretend it wasn't. The following Thanksgiving, my mother made pot roast again. My father sat at the head of the table. The same chair, the same posture, but something was different in the way he held himself. Less like he was defending a position, more like he was just present. My brother was there. We were careful with each other. Not warm, but not cold either. The beginning of something that might eventually become normal if we let it. Halfway through dinner, my father looked at me and said, "Tell us what you're working on." Not, "How's the consulting going?" Not, "Still keeping busy." He looked at me and asked me directly, like my answer was the one he actually wanted to hear. I told them about the Chattanooga deal and the refinance I was planning for the Raleigh properties and the small non-profit I'd been quietly funding that helped women in transitional housing understand tenant rights. I talked for almost 10 minutes and nobody interrupted, and my father asked 2 follow-up questions and my mother cried a little, which she blamed on the onions in the pot roast. My brother looked at his plate through most of it, but at the end, when I finished, he said quietly, "That's a lot." "It took a while," I said. He nodded once. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. After dinner, my father found me in the kitchen while I was wrapping up leftovers. He stood in the doorway for a second before he spoke. "I want you to know I think about that conference room," he said. "I think about sitting across from you and not seeing you, not because of the glasses or the name." He paused. "Because I'd already decided what you were. I'd already put you somewhere in my head and stopped looking." "I know," I said. "That won't happen again." I handed him a container of leftovers to carry to the car. He took it. Outside, the night was cold and clear, the kind of November night where the stars are sharper than you expect them to be. I stood on the porch for a minute after everyone else had gone inside, and I thought about the parking garage and Irene's forum post and the first lease agreement I'd ever signed as a landlord, and the moment my father had said, "It's you with that vertigo" on his face. I thought about all the years I'd sat at that table and poured my own water, and I thought, that's done now, not because they changed everything overnight, not because the conversation was over, but because I had stopped waiting for them to define the edges of what I was allowed to be. I already knew. I had built it. I had the paperwork to prove it. And whether or not they saw it first, I had always been standing right here. I still think about the moment my father said, "It's you," not as a question, but as something breaking open. The vertigo on his face, the way the room went quiet except for a drill somewhere down the hallway, ordinary and indifferent to the fact that everything between us had just shifted. People talk about revenge like it's a destination. Like you arrive somewhere and plant a flag and feel the satisfaction of it. I didn't feel that. What I felt, sitting across from my father in his own conference room, was something closer to grief and relief at the same time. Grief for how many years we'd wasted in a dynamic that never had to be that way, and relief that it was finally over. What I've come to understand is that what happened between us wasn't random. It followed its own logic. My father spent decades believing that worth was something you declared out loud, at dinner tables, in boardrooms, in the way you talked about your children to other men. He thought confidence was the same as wisdom. It isn't. The way he spoke about women and money and what men wanted wasn't cruelty exactly. It was a failure of thinking. He'd inherited a worldview and never examined it. And when you don't examine what you believe, you eventually get a reckoning with reality. That's not punishment. That's just how cause and effect works. I made different choices, not because I was better than him. I wasn't, not at 28 sitting in a parking garage crying with nowhere to go. But I made the choice to learn instead of collapse. Irene's forum post could have scrolled past me that night. I could have closed the laptop and gone to sleep and looked for a regular job in the morning. Instead, I stayed up until 2 reading about cap rates and debt service coverage ratios. That wasn't talent. It was a decision I made over and over again for 3 years, in spreadsheets and inspection reports and early mornings at a title company when nobody knew what I was building. That persistence, the stubborn, quiet, unglamorous kind, is the thing that actually moved my life. Not the reveal. Not the moment my father recognized me across his own desk. Those moments were just the visible surface of something that had been accumulating for years underneath, in silence, where nobody could see it, and therefore nobody could take it from me. And the ethics of it mattered to me. I could have used my position as Halcyon's partner to hurt him. I didn't. Not because I owe him grace he hadn't earned, but because destroying something isn't the same as building something. I wanted to build. I restructured the deal. I fixed the cash flow. I kept his name on the company, not as a gift, as a choice about what kind of person I intended to be when this was all over. My father told me, standing in his office doorway after that Thanksgiving, I was so sure I knew the shape of what you were supposed to be that I never looked at what you actually were. I've thought about that sentence a lot, because it's not just about him. It's a warning I carry for myself too. The moment I stop looking, really looking at what's actually in front of me, I become the thing I spent 3 years working to move past. Irene once told me that boring is how you build something they can't take. She was right. The work was boring. The patience was hard. The silence was lonely sometimes. But what's standing on the other side of all of it? That's mime.